All right, hi everyone. My name is Kimberly Brown and I'm going to be your instructor this semester. So just to tell you guys a little bit about myself, I have a master's degree in clinical psychology from Mississippi State University. And for those of you who might not know, clinical psychology focuses on the assessment, diagnosis, and treatment of psychological disorders. So I was planning to do therapy when I graduated, but they were looking for someone to teach a section of general psychology, and I was happy to get that opportunity. And what I discovered was that I actually loved teaching. So even though this was not the career path that I had initially seen for myself, I am really happy that this is where I ended up. So I've been teaching at Mississippi State since 2013. I've been teaching at the W since 2015. Other things to tell you guys about myself: I am married. My husband Michael and I have been married for 11 years, and we have 3 awesome kids. I have 2 sons, Christian and Brandon, and 1 daughter, Maddie. So I tell you about my kids for a few reasons. First of all, they're adorable and I like talking about them, but also probably at some point during the videos I'll reference my kids. So in addition to teaching college students, I also homeschool my kids, so that may come up in the lecture videos as well. Other things to tell you guys about myself: I am a Christian, and that's not something that will probably come up again at any other point during the semester, but it's an important part of who I am, and that's why I include it as part of my introduction. The other thing that I usually tell students on the first day of class is that I have OCD, and I take Zoloft for that, which I'm aware might seem like an odd thing for me to share with you guys, especially when these videos are recorded and put on YouTube for the world. Not that the world is probably interested in my YouTube channel, but still, putting that out there. My view on this is that if those of us in psychology are ashamed of our own mental health struggles, then we're hypocrites and we're contributing to the stigma. I also think that in order for me to tell my students, like, hey, reach out, get help, which I do tell my students that, I need to also be able to admit that there have been plenty of times when I've needed to reach out and get help. Also, my Zoloft makes me more fun to be around, so I think that benefits you guys as well. So you're welcome for that. So I think you'll get to know a little bit more about me throughout the semester. One of the hard things about teaching an online class is that we don't have that face-to-face interaction. Part of the reason why I record videos is so that you can actually hear from me the information that we're talking about. But I do want to be able to hear from you guys as well. So we will have some short writing assignments we'll talk about later where I can get some of your feedback. But if you want to email me and just introduce yourself, then that's perfectly fine as well. I would enjoy that. You don't have to do that, but that's something you can do. Also, when we talk about the syllabus, we will discuss the student authentication videos. So I am going to ask you guys to record a short introduction to yourself, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the syllabus. So at this point, just to let you know what's happening, I'm going to talk for a couple more minutes, and then we're going to switch gears and look at the syllabus. After that, we're going to have just a few minutes of lecture. This first video is really just to introduce you to the class, and then we'll talk a little bit about what educational psychology really means when we get to that little bit of lecture. But the other things that I want to say before I get into the syllabus, as far as being successful in this class in particular, as well as college classes in general, the key to success is really personal responsibility. So in any given semester, I might have one student that makes an A and one student that makes an F. And when you look at the differences between them, you see that, they both had the same material, the same instructor, the same syllabus, the same assessments. Really, the difference between them is going to be the effort that they put into the class. So if you think of this class as a relationship, I have my responsibilities. I'm going to answer your emails. I'm going to give you all the material that you need. I'm going to be fair in my grading. But you have responsibilities as well to watch the videos, to do the assignments, to study, to ask me if you have questions. So as long as I'm doing my part and you're doing your part, I really do feel like you guys will be happy with the grade that you have at the end of the semester. Okay? So if you have any questions about anything at any point, then please feel free to email me. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and switch gears and pull up the syllabus. All right, so I have the syllabus pulled up here. You can find this syllabus in Canvas. I do plan to discuss the syllabus first, and then we'll take a quick look at Canvas as well so you can see where everything is located. So my name is Kimberly Brown. Hi, I mentioned that. As far as the best way to get in touch with me, I have my email address listed here. This is an online class, so I expect that most, if not all, of our communication will be online. So you can use the email address that's listed here or email me through Canvas. Either one of those is fine. I will respond to your emails as soon as possible. As far as resources are concerned, this is an online class, so you need to make sure that you have access to a computer that has reliable internet access. And then as far as the textbook is concerned, so this class falls at a bit of an awkward time as far as the textbook is concerned. So we've been using the 6th edition of Educational Psychology. And at some point this summer, the 6th edition is going to go out of print, and then they'll be using the 7th edition. As far as I'm concerned, you can use either one of these. Either one of these is fine. Whichever one you can get your hands on easily, that's affordable. Really, the 6th or the 7th edition, whichever one you are able to get, is fine by me. My view on the textbook is that it's a great supplemental resource. My exams and assignments are going to primarily come from my lecture videos, so the textbook is something I view as more of a supplement. So let me know if you have questions. As far as the description of this class, we will get into this a little bit more in the brief bit of lecture that we're going to do at the end of this video. But the purpose of this class is to take what we know from psychological research and then apply that to an educational setting so we can try to improve our teaching methods by considering the things we've learned from psychology. As far as the format of the class, you'll see when we get to the schedule that there are going to be writing assignments and exams that will be completed through Canvas, and there will also be lecture videos. This is the first lecture video. I am going to be posting the lecture videos on YouTube, but then I will put the links to those videos in Canvas so you can access them through Canvas. All right, as far as the topics that we're going to be covering, you can see these listed here. We're going to be starting off with research methods in our next lecture video, and then we're going to talk about different aspects of development, testing. We're going to talk about behavior modification a good bit. So my view here is that if you're going to be working in an educational setting, you're certainly going to need to have some tools that you can use to increase those desirable behaviors and decrease those undesirable behaviors. So we're going to have pretty much the whole last module is going to be devoted to behavior modification. Now, there are some standards here that the education department likes to use. So I have some information here about how these standards are going to be achieved in this class, if you would like to look over that. Now, as far as the requirements for the class, so I'm going to expect you to participate in the assignments. I'm going to expect you to be technologically literate. I'm going to expect you to be resourceful, to be professional. So please make sure to proofread your assignments before you submit them. Be sure to read over your emails before you send them and make sure that they are not only typed correctly, but also respectful in nature. It mentions here applications. So I'm going to be having you guys do writing assignments throughout the class. This is going to be the way that I get to know you a little bit and your thoughts on different topics. So it's going to be important for you to make sure that you put a lot of effort into your writing assignments. We'll talk about these in a little bit, but there will be 12, I call them activities, but these are the writing assignments throughout the course of the semester, and you do get 2 drop grades for those. So I'm going to keep your top 10 activity grades. Each activity is going to be worth 10 points, up to 10 points. We'll talk about that in a second when we get to the grading. And each one needs to have at least 200 words. And we'll talk about this later, but please make sure that if you use sources, that you cite them appropriately. I'm not going to ask you to use sources, just going to ask you to think about what we talk about in the lecture videos and give me your thoughts on them. But if you do use other sources, be sure to cite them. All right, so as far as communication goes, I will be sending out email reminders and I will be communicating through these lecture videos. And of course, I'm open to receiving emails from you guys as well. you'll see that the deadlines are going to be listed towards the end of the syllabus. I do give 2 drop grades for those writing assignments, but as far as exams go, you won't be having drop grades for exams, so make sure that you're doing your work when it's due. As far as attendance goes, and this is an online class, so that makes attendance a little bit more tricky, but what you'll see is that I'm going to use the writing assignments basically as a measure of your attendance. Are you completing those assignments and submitting them in a timely fashion? So please make sure that you are doing that. As you'll see, we have everything in Canvas that you will need. I'll actually go ahead and pull that up here. So this is the class in Canvas. Now, at the time that I'm recording this video, I have not yet loaded our summer videos up here yet. So whenever you actually open up the class, when the class is open, the modules will also include links to lecture videos. But beyond that, you can see that this is where the syllabus is located. The slides for each module are here. I have it split into 4 modules. So you have the slides, the writing assignments, and the exam for each module, as well as a study guide and a practice exam for extra credit. And so that's going to be repeated for each module, and then you'll see that you have the final exam after you finish module 4. So everything that you need should be in Canvas for you. If you have questions, let me know. Make sure that you're using technology appropriately. I'm sure you guys are probably familiar with that at this point, but if you have questions, let me know. It is possible that the syllabus might have to be changed. I mean, let's face it, 2020 taught us that we have to be flexible. So it is possible, but I don't think it's very likely. I think the syllabus is pretty much set, but if something does change, I will let you know as soon as possible. So the way that I'm going to be calculating grades, I'm going to be adding up your total number of points, and then I'm going to be dividing that by the total number of possible points, and that will give you a percentage, which will determine your grade. So if you want an A in the class, you need 90% of those points. If you want a B, you need 80%, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm going to add up your points from exams, your points from activities, and your extra credit points. Note that students can only earn 15 points of extra credit. So there are practice exams. You can also get extra credit for doing your authentication video, which we'll mention in a second. And there's at least one other extra credit writing assignment as well. But remember that you can only earn up to 15 points of extra credit. So the student authentication submission, we're going to talk about in just a second. This is your authentication video. That's something that is required. So if you don't complete that, you won't get credit for the class regardless of your grade. So make sure you do that. And then also you can get a little bit of extra credit for doing that as well. So when I'm calculating your grade, I'm going to add up your points on exams 1 through 5, and then also your points on the writing assignments. There are up to 600 possible points here. I'll also add in any extra credit points that you have up to that 15-point maximum. I'll take the number of points that you've earned, I'll divide it by 600, and that will give me your grade in the class. Now, notice that there are up to 100 points available from those writing activities. There are 12 assignments, and I'm only going to keep your top 10, so you do get 2 drop grades for those. Sometimes students like to save those up and not do the last 2 activities, but maybe throughout the semester, if there's 1 or 2 that you miss, you forget, or you don't get full credit on, you can use your drop grades there. All right, as far as the student authentication assignment goes, there is an assignment that is created in Canvas where you can submit this. So we're going to have you authenticate your identity 2 ways. 1, you use your own unique information to log into Canvas. So that's one thing. But the other thing we're going to be doing is through authentication videos. So all I need you to do is just record a brief introduction, tell me a little bit about yourself, whatever you would like to share. And while you're doing that, make sure that you show a valid ID. Students usually use their driver's license, but a WID works as well. Please make sure that you do cover up any information that you just don't want out there. I am going to ask you to upload these videos on YouTube and set them as unlisted, which means that no one can see them unless you give them the link. But even though we're doing that, and that gives you a measure of protection, I would still strongly encourage you to cover up anything that people might use for identity theft and that kind of thing. And of course, after I've graded the video, you can always take it back down. If you have questions or concerns about that, let me know. but make sure that you are planning to authenticate your identity. Okay, as far as academic integrity and plagiarism goes, first of all, with the writing assignments, make sure that you're giving your own work. And if you do cite a source, if you do use a source, make sure that you cite it appropriately. And make sure that the majority of the assignment is your own words. Like, even if you took a source, cited it appropriately, if the majority of the assignment you turned in was a source that you cited, I still don't have much original content from you. So make sure that you are primarily giving me your own original content, and if you use any other content, make sure to cite it appropriately. As far as the exams are concerned, I'm fine with you using your notes and the textbook. If you have the textbook, I do ask that you not use other people or other internet sources during the exams. All right, as far as Title IX is concerned, this is put into place to make our campus a safer place. So the idea that we would like to have a learning environment free from discrimination based on sex. So there are several different things that could fall under this category. One thing that's emphasized here is sexual violence. If you feel like you've been the victim of something like this, then you can definitely contact the Title IX officer on campus, and there's information here about how to do that. Students sometimes come to me with questions or concerns as a professor in general, and as a professor with a background in psychology in particular. And I want you guys to know that I am here for that. But you also need to know that I am a mandatory reporter because of my position. So as an instructor, if a student were to come to me with thoughts about hurting himself or herself, or hurting someone else, or abuse of a child, or abuse of a vulnerable adult, then I would have to report that, which is not necessarily the same thing as reporting that to the police, although that might become necessary, but that would be reporting this to the Title IX folks, to my department head, that sort of thing, to make sure that everyone is safe. So just want you to be aware that I am in a position where I have to report that. All right, as far as students who need accommodations go, I am absolutely happy to provide any accommodations that are needed. There is a system put in place here where a student would need to contact the student support specialist and have an accommodations plan created. And then that accommodations plan is sent to me. And of course, you can contact me if you have questions or if you want to tell me more about specific accommodations that you need. There's also some information here about some things that are available for students on campus. So Student Success Center, tutoring, writing center, these sorts of things. Definitely the counseling center. Just make sure that you are taking advantage of the opportunities that the university provides. Also, if a student has a concern or complaint, I would ask about this class in particular. I would ask that you would come to me first. And if we have a problem that we're not able to resolve, then there are steps that can be taken beyond that. Meeting with a department head or with the dean of education to sort things out. So let me know if you have any questions or concerns there. All right, now as far as the format for the class, this is my first time setting the class up this way. So this is sort of an experiment, but I think it will work well. Basically what I've done here is I've let you move at your own pace. So I've divided everything up into 4 modules. I guess you could say technically 5 if you count the final exam as its own little module. But really 4 main modules. In each module, you will have 4 lecture videos to watch, 3 writing assignments to complete, and an exam. Now, you will also see the authentication video is included here. That's something extra that you guys just need to make sure that you're taking care of. So I've taken the class, I've split the material into 4 modules, and I've split the time into 4 sections. So all the Module 1 assignments are due by 11:59 p.m. on June 6th. And for Module 2, it'll be June 20th, and so on and so forth. What this means is that you could go through this class slowly, doing a little bit at a time, and just make sure you finish Module 1 by the Module 1 deadline. Make sure you finish Module 2 by the Module 2 deadline. Or if you wanted to move through the class more quickly, you can do that as well. All of the assignments for the course are going to be open the day the class opens, so May 26th. So you can move at your own pace here, but do make sure that you're finishing each module by the deadline that's set up here. Also, remember that for the writing assignments, these activities, there are 12 of them total, but you do get 2 drop grades for that. So I'm going to keep your top 10 activities. Okay. So the exams, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, the exams for exams 1 through 4 are multiple choice, true, false, and matching. And once you open them, you'll have 75 minutes to take it, and you'll need to take it in one session once you open it. And then, yeah, that's probably about. Oh, the one other thing to say about that is that I do have 2 opinion questions on each exam. So you'll see this, that there are 2 questions that just look a little bit different from the other questions, like which one of these do you think is most important? Or do you think that standardized testing is helpful or hurtful or what? So for those 2 opinion questions on each exam, everyone's going to get full credit for those. Beyond that, I don't think there's anything else to say about exams 1 through 4. Each one covers that particular module. The final exam is going to be kind of a take-home essay format. So it will be essay questions. And when I say take-home, what I mean is that you should be able to go in, type some, work on it, save it, come back to it. Just make sure that you submit it by the deadline. So the final exam has 10 essay questions, each one worth 10 points. So as I said, all these assignments are going to be open at the beginning of the class, and you can work at your own pace there. All right, this has just been a quick overview of the syllabus, but if you have any questions, please let me know. At this point, I'm going to jump into just a tiny bit of lecture for today. All right, so as I said, we're just going to have a brief introduction here. You can find the slides that we're going to be covering under modules, under material for exam 1. Really, I just want to spend a couple minutes here introducing the idea of educational psychology. So, first of all, a potential definition for educational psychology. A branch of psychology that specializes in understanding teaching and learning in educational settings. So when it says a branch of psychology, then you might start to ask yourself, well, what do you mean when you say psychology? Because there are certainly many different ideas that come to mind when you hear the word psychology. I think that a lot of people have an inherent distrust of psychologists. I have certainly experienced that. Or at the very least, people are not very sure that it's a science at times. So the field of psychology has not enjoyed as much respect as other health-related fields. But when we're talking about psychology, perhaps we're thinking about the study of the mind, perhaps, or the study of human behavior might be another way to think about psychology. And within that kind of general definition, there are a lot of different areas in psychology. So clinical psychology, counseling psychology, cognitive psychology, school psychology, which is very closely related to educational psychology. So when we talk specifically about educational psychology, it is a branch of a much bigger field that specifically allows us to use the things that we know from psychology to make our teaching better or to be more effective in an educational setting. So some of the information that we're going to be talking about throughout the course of this class has to do with things like memory and attention. So issues that are cognitive processes that we've studied through, maybe researched in cognitive psychology that tells us something we can use in the classroom. But we'll also be talking about some issues that are more related to clinical psychology. We'll be talking about different diagnoses, things like ADHD or perhaps emotional issues, behavioral issues in the classroom. So what I hope to do is to give you the parts of psychology that are most helpful for you in a classroom setting so that if you're going to be an educator, if you're going to be a parent, if you're going to be around kids, then this class can be helpful for you. So if we're talking about using the principles of psychology to improve our teaching, then we have to ask ourselves the question, is teaching something that can be improved? So there's a question here, is teaching an art or a science? What do I mean when I say an art or a science? Well, typically when you think of science, you think of something that has been well researched. You think of something that has specific steps that we follow, something that is a field that has been studied and a field that is respected. And maybe when you think of science, you might think of things like chemistry or biology, right? But a science is something that involves research, that involves hard facts. On the other hand, though, what is an art? An art what comes to mind when you hear the word art, maybe you're creating something, you're improving upon something, you're making something beautiful, right? One of the tricky things about teaching is that it is actually a combination of science and an art. And how could it be a combination of both? Well, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. What I want to do at the moment is show you a brief video clip here from The Big Bang Theory, which is a fantastic show. I've not kept up with it in a while. When you have young children, you can't always watch a lot of television that adults enjoy. However, it's a great show. For those of you who might not know, I was just going to set this clip up a little bit. The Big Bang Theory centers around some very intelligent men that are friends, and most of them work in the physics realm. So Sheldon Cooper is an incredibly intelligent, I think he's like a theoretical physicist or something like that, and I really have no clue what that means. But we're going to see what happens when a person who has the science behind teaching, he knows the material, he's done the research, however, he's missing the art of teaching. And so the best way to show you what this looks like is just to show you what happens when a person doesn't have the art side of teaching that is kind of necessary. So we're going to watch a clip real quick, and hopefully you'll see what I mean here.
Good evening. I'm your guest lecturer, Dr. Sheldon Cooper. I was expecting applause, but I suppose stunned silence is equally appropriate. I agreed to speak to you this evening because I was told that you're the best and the brightest of this university's doctoral candidates. Of course, that's like saying you're the most important electron in a hydrogen atom. Because you see, there's only one electron in a hydrogen atom. Best and brightest, my sweet patootie. All right, let's begin. Show of hands. Who here is familiar with the concept of topological insulators? Don't kid yourselves.
I found another tweet from a student at Sheldon's lecture. Dr. Cooper has taken a relatively boring subject and managed to make it completely insufferable. Plus, he looks like a giant insect.
Listen to this one. Does Einstein's theory explain why time flies when you're having fun, but when you're listening to Dr. Cooper, it falls out of the sky dead?
Oh, somebody took pictures and uploaded them to their Flickr account.
Wow. How do you get an entire lecture hall to flip you off at the same time?
Apparently, for Sheldon, all you need to do is turn your back.
Hey, Leonard, is your Wi-Fi down? I can't get on.
Oh, Sheldon changed the password. It's now Penny is a freeloader. No spaces.
Thanks. What are you guys doing?
Sheldon gave a lecture at the university tonight. We're reading the reviews.
Oh, how'd he do?
Well, picture the Hindenburg meets Chernobyl meets 3 Mile Island meets Tron 2.
That bad, huh?
Read this woman's tweet.
Listening to Dr. Cooper has made me want to start cutting myself again.
Well, good evening, Leonard, Howard, Raj, freeloader.
So, how'd the lecture go?
In a word, triumphant.
Really? Triumphant?
Oh, yes, you should have seen those young people. They're thirsty for knowledge, drinking in my wisdom. I may have changed a few lives today.
Oh, please let me tell him.
I don't know. I kind of promised Howard.
Tell me what?
Actually, we should all share the moment, Raj, if you would.
Oh, tweets about my lecture. That's rather unfair. That's downright cruel. Plus, insects have 6 legs. Yeah, I'm not familiar with the acronym KMN.
From the context, we think it means kill me now.
Well, suppose everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I think I'll turn in. I want to teach those poopy heads anyway.
FYI, I think that's what Darth Vader said just before he started building the Death Star.
All right, I think you get the idea there, that just because a person knows the information that they're teaching really well does not necessarily make them a good teacher. There are some artistic aspects involved as well. So science is both, or teaching rather I should say, is both a science and an art. The scientific side of things is that we do research, and actually our first full lecture video is going to focus primarily on research. We do research to help us understand what techniques work, what students respond to in the classroom, how to teach certain kinds of students. So there may be students who have disabilities, there may be students who have extra issues to overcome, and we may need to use different approaches when educating those students. So certainly we have theories that come from our research, that come from our own personal experience, and a teacher that wants to continue to serve their students the best way possible would continue to pay attention to what's working and what's not working in the classroom and make adjustments based on that. Having said that, though, teaching remains an art. I have to admit to you guys, I'm pretty sure that my first few lectures were not fantastic. I don't think everyone in the lecture hall flipped me off at the same time. I may have to try to check on that, but no. The idea is that when you first start teaching, and maybe you think just because you know the material, that's all that you need. But no, there's certainly things that come from personal experiences. You get better at it the more you practice, or at least I hope. You get better at it the more that you practice. So it's a combination of both the science as well as the art of public speaking and the art of being able to communicate information in a way that makes sense. So someone who is a good teacher is someone who not only knows the information, but someone who also can engage with the students. So when you're asking the question, what makes a good teacher, this is probably a good time for you to reflect on this. Some of you may have already decided that you would like to be an educator as your career. Some of you may be taking this class as an elective, or perhaps maybe you're a psychology major, but you're not planning on teaching. I will say, though, that you don't know for sure what you're going to do until you get there. Certainly when I went into psychology, teaching was not part of my plan, but obviously that's something that I enjoy and love doing now. So everyone should have a philosophy here. If you're not going to be teaching at a university or teaching a high school or elementary school, you'll still be teaching. You'll be teaching yourself information. You'll be teaching children that you might potentially have one day. So it's a good idea to think about what makes a teacher effective. So when they asked me to teach my first class, this was something that I sat down and thought about. I kind of made a mental list of professors that I had worked with that I really enjoyed, as well as professors that maybe things didn't go as smoothly with. And I tried to figure out exactly what aspects of their teaching that I liked, and I incorporated those. And in addition to that, I went to some of the professors that were on my positive list. I didn't go to anybody on my negative list and say, hey, how am I going to fix the problems? No. But I went to the people that I was looking up to, and I asked them questions about their teaching style. So this might be a good time for you to think about what are some characteristics of effective teachers. But to get you started, we have some results of some research here. When you ask college students about what makes a professor effective, what makes the teacher the best teacher you've ever had. So these are a list of 10 things that students were looking for in college professors. Now, I thought that it was interesting that having a sense of humor was number one. I figured a sense of humor would be on the list. I didn't know that it would be considered the most important thing, but obviously keeping the class interesting can include humor, but there are other ways to make the class interesting as well. Having knowledge of your subject is very important. A teacher needs to be able to answer questions from students, needs to be able to give examples, explain things in a way that makes sense. Basically, go beyond just presenting the information that's in the textbook, because if all you're doing is just regurgitating what's in the textbook, you're not really helping the students. They already have the textbook. So explaining things clearly, being willing to spend time to help students, whether that be answering emails, office hours, or just meeting with students as needed. Making sure that you're fair, basically making sure that all students have the same opportunities, that you don't make exceptions for one student that you wouldn't make for other students. It says here treating students like adults. Now keep in mind these would be older students here. But I think the idea is you need to have age-appropriate expectations. On the one hand, sometimes maybe we have expectations that are too high, expecting too much from our students. But on the other hand, I think sometimes we have expectations that are too low, and you're not going to get the best results when you're not really expecting much from students. You're not really pushing them to achieve. So somewhere in between, the balance is tricky to find but important. Getting along well with the students, relating well, being considerate of the students' feelings. Certainly there are some topics that are harder to teach than others. As a psychology professor, I feel like this is something that I have to face frequently. A lot of the topics that a person discusses in a psychology class are very emotional. They have a lot of different experiences in the classroom. So when I teach interpersonal relations, I talk about divorce. Well, I know my students, if everyone in that room has been impacted in some way by divorce. When I teach abnormal psychology, when I have a suicide lecture, obviously there's emotional content there. So being considerate about the way that you say things and listening to your students and let them give feedback as well. Not showing favoritism kind of goes back to being fair. Now, if we have the characteristics of the best teachers, we also have characteristics of the worst teachers here. Apparently, one of the worst things you can do is be boring, so no pressure. Have to entertain, but also, in addition to that, explaining things clearly, making the material easy to understand as much as possible. So this list is kind of the flip side of the list we just saw a second ago. Obviously, teachers that show favoritism are not preferred by students. Having a poor attitude. I once had a student, not at MUW, but I once had a student come to me and say they had an issue with a particular professor and said, it feels like this professor just doesn't want to be here. And what I'm thinking to myself is, if the professor doesn't want to be there, why would the students want to be there? So having a poor attitude obviously can rub off on the students as well. Expecting too much or not enough from students, so having appropriate expectations that are based on age, based on the type of class, making sure that you are giving students the resources they need to be able to be successful, relating to students, listening to students. Different professors have different styles on this. I personally really enjoy having discussion, which is not something we can do face-to-face in an online class, but when I do teach face-to-face classes, I do like having a lot of discussion so I can hear back from the students. Giving the work might go along with expecting too much. Being too strict. There's a fine line here, though. At a certain point, if the teacher is being too strict, then the students may be afraid to approach the professor, afraid to ask questions, and not enjoy that classroom experience. But then there are times when students can get a little bit out of hand, and so you have to have a solution for that as well. You can't let the classroom become too disorderly either. Giving individual attention as needed, which is harder the more students that you have. So I have had experiences of teaching classes of 100 students. I've had experiences, I once taught a class that had 7 students in it. So as much as possible, giving individual attention to students, and then going back to that lacking control of the classroom, making sure that we have a general classroom structure, we have general classroom rules, and that there are punishments associated with not following those rules. So this has just been an introduction. Really what I want you to get out of this little snippet here is that teaching is something that can be improved upon, and that psychology is a field that can help us improve our education. So we're going to try to combine these two fields together this semester and talk about ways that the principles behind psychology can make your classroom run more smoothly. But then also, even if you're not planning on teaching, there'll be a lot of good psychology information here that you can use in other fields as well. So let me know if you have any questions. If you would like to just email me and introduce yourself, that's perfectly fine as well. That's all we're going to do for today. Just be looking for our next lecture video, which is going to focus primarily on research methods. So I'll talk to you guys then.